Adrenal insufficiency doesn't care that you managed a 3-mile walk yesterday, because today, even the walk from your bed to the kitchen feels like a climb up Everest. It is the most maddeningly inconsistent part of this condition, this idea that you can take the exact same dose of hydrocortisone at the exact same minute as you did 24 hours ago, and yet your body responds as if you've been handed a completely different set of instructions. We often treat our bodies like machines, where if we put in the same fuel and the same maintenance, we should get the same output. But biology isn't linear. In the world of adrenal insufficiency, a good day can feel like a cruel trick because it sets a standard that your physiology simply isn't equipped to maintain every single time the sun comes up. You find yourself trapped in this cycle of questioning your own sanity, wondering if the fatigue is real or if you've somehow just lost your grit overnight. But the reality is that your body doesn't reset at midnight. It carries the metabolic debt, the inflammatory load, and the lingering echoes of yesterday's stress into the new morning, creating a physiological landscape that is never truly the same twice. We have to stop looking at symptoms as isolated events and start seeing them as the result of a complex, ongoing conversation between your medication and a world that never stops asking more of you. If you've ever felt like a different person from one day to the next, it's not in your head, it's in your hormones, or rather, the lack of a system that can automatically adjust them for you.
This is the final part of our deep dive into the hidden symptoms of adrenal insufficiency, and today we are looking at the why behind the variability. We're moving past the surface level frustration to understand why "I could do it yesterday" is a dangerous trap, and how the ghost of yesterday's activity might be exactly what's haunting your energy levels this afternoon. When you have a working set of adrenal glands, you possess an internal thermostat that is constantly, invisibly adjusting. If you get a flat tire, your brain signals for a pulse of cortisol. If you skip lunch, your blood sugar drops, and the HPA axis, the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal glands, kicks in to mobilize energy. If you're cold, if you're startled, if you're fighting off a virus you don't even know you have yet, your adrenals are micro-adjusting by the second. But when you have adrenal insufficiency, that thermostat is broken. You are effectively living in a house where the heat is controlled by a manual timer rather than a sensor. You set the timer for 7 a.m., 12 p.m., and 5 p.m., hoping the house stays warm, but if a window blows open or the temperature outside drops 40 degrees, that timer doesn't care. It just keeps ticking along, providing the same amount of heat regardless of the blizzard outside. This is the fundamental gap in glucocorticoid replacement therapy. We take oral hydrocortisone, which has a remarkably short half-life, meaning it peaks and then drops out of the system relatively quickly. We try to mimic the natural circadian rhythm, but we can never truly mimic the pulsatile nature of real cortisol secretion, those tiny, sharp bursts that happen in response to the moment-to-moment demands of life. So, when your symptoms shift dramatically from Monday to Tuesday, it's often because Tuesday asked for a burst of cortisol that your manual timer wasn't programmed to provide. We often search for a single smoking gun reason for a bad day.
We ask, did I take my pill 10 minutes late, or was it the sandwich I ate for lunch? And while timing and nutrition matter, the answer is usually much more atmospheric. It's the cumulative weight of what I call the invisible load. This load includes things like the ambient temperature. Heat is a massive stressor for people with adrenal insufficiency, especially primary AI, where salt wasting is an issue. It includes the low-level systemic inflammation of a body just trying to maintain stasis. It includes the psychological toll of navigating a world that expects you to be normal. When you add these up, you realize that your body's requirements are a moving target, while your medication is a stationary object. The friction between those two things is where the variability lives.
One of the most common traps we fall into is the yesterday standard. You look back at a day where you were productive, where you felt relatively sharp, and you use that as the baseline for what you should be able to do. But yesterday wasn't just a day, it was an investment of physiological resources. If you spent those resources heavily yesterday, you might be waking up today in a deficit. This is what we call the delayed response or the physiological hangover. In a person with normal adrenal function, the body recovers from a heavy day by pumping out extra cortisol during sleep and in the early morning hours to facilitate repair and reset the system. If you have AI, your body wants that extra resource for recovery, but it can't make it. So you wake up the next day not having fully cleared the metabolic trash from the day before. The fatigue you feel on Wednesday might actually be the bill for Tuesday's success coming due. We have to understand that being able to do something and being unaffected by doing it are two entirely different concepts. You might have successfully navigated a stressful work meeting or a family gathering, and in the moment you felt fine. The adrenaline carried you through. But once that artificial high wears off, your body is left trying to pick up the pieces with a fixed, limited supply of cortisol. This creates a confusing lag time. You feel bad for no reason on a quiet Thursday, but the reason was actually the chaos of Tuesday. This lag makes it incredibly hard to plan your life because the consequences of your actions aren't immediate. It's like a credit card where the transaction doesn't show up on the statement for 48 hours. You think you're spending within your means until you see the final balance. This is why we have to widen our lens when we look at our symptoms. If you're having a rough day, don't just look at what happened in the last 2 hours. Look at the last 72. Look at your sleep quality over the last 3 nights. Look at whether you've been standing more than usual or if you've been dealing with a nagging injury. The body is a continuous narrative, not a series of short stories that end when you close your eyes at night. Let's talk about the specific levers of demand that change your day-to-day experience. First and foremost is sleep. For a healthy person, sleep is when the HPA axis resets. For someone with AI, poor sleep is a direct physiological stressor. If you toss and turn, if you have sleep apnea, or if you just didn't get enough hours, your body starts the day in a state of emergency mode, needing more cortisol to simply keep your blood pressure stable and your brain functioning. When you combine poor sleep with the natural trough in your medication levels, that period before your first morning dose kicks in, you are starting the day at a severe disadvantage. Then there's the physical load. This isn't just about exercise in the traditional sense. It's about total time on your feet. It's about the energy required to maintain posture if you have comorbidities like POTS or chronic pain. Pain itself is a massive consumer of cortisol. If your back is acting up or you have a headache, your body is screaming for a resource it can't produce to dampen that inflammatory response. Then we have the external environment. If you live in a climate that is swinging from cool to hot, or if you're spending time in a high-stress, high-noise environment, your nervous system is on high alert. Every time your fight or flight response is triggered by a loud noise or a stressful email, your body looks for cortisol to balance that out. When it's not there, you experience what many call brain fog, which is really just the brain slowing down non-essential functions to conserve what little energy it has.
We also have to consider the internal weather.
Things like your hydration levels and your electrolyte balance, especially for those with Addison's disease, where the mineralocorticoid aldosterone is also missing. Your ability to hold on to fluid and salt is compromised. If you're slightly dehydrated, your heart has to work harder. Your blood pressure drops and you feel that heavy, leaden fatigue. You might have taken your pills, but if your salt balance is off, the hydrocortisone can't do its job effectively. All these levers are moving independently of each other every day, creating a unique physiological weather pattern for every single 24-hour period. It's no wonder we feel different every day. The environment inside and outside of us is never the same. There is a psychological weight to this variability that we rarely discuss. It's the "but I could do it yesterday" trap. This trap is set by ourselves, our families, and our employers. When you have a visible illness, like a broken leg, people understand that your capacity is limited. But when you have a condition that fluctuates, people, including yourself, tend to see your best day as your true capacity. If you could go to the grocery store on Saturday, why are you struggling to get off the couch on Monday? The implication is that you are being lazy or that you're giving in to the illness. This leads to a cycle of overexertion where we try to prove we are fine on our good days, which only deepens the deficit for the bad days. We have to fight the urge to use our peak performance as our standard. Think of it like a professional athlete. An Olympic sprinter doesn't run at world record pace every single day. They have recovery days. They have days where they focus on mobility. If they tried to hit their personal best every morning, they would be injured within a week. Adrenal insufficiency forces you into a state where every normal activity is essentially an athletic event for your metabolism. We need to shift our mindset from "what is the most I can do" to "what is a sustainable level of activity?" This variability isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign of a body that is working overtime to compensate for a missing regulator. When we judge ourselves against our best days, we're ignoring the reality of our condition.
It's important to remember that capacity isn't a fixed number. It's a sliding scale. On a day with perfect sleep, low stress, and cool weather, your capacity might be at an 80%. On a day with a looming deadline and a scratchy throat, your capacity might drop to a 20%. Both of those are your real capacity for those specific days. Accepting this variability as a physiological fact rather than a character flaw is the first step toward managing the condition without the constant burden of guilt.
To navigate this, we have to become detectives of our own lives. We have to look for the patterns that emerge when variability seems random. This is where tracking becomes a powerful tool. Not tracking to obsess over every minute detail, but tracking to see the shape of your week. When you look back at a string of bad days, can you see a common thread? Maybe you notice that you always crash 2 days after a social event. That's a pattern. Maybe you notice that your brain fog is always worse in the afternoon when you've had a high-carb lunch. That's a pattern. By identifying these, you move from being a victim of random symptoms to being a manager of predictable outcomes. You can start to say, okay, I have a big presentation on Thursday, so I am intentionally going to do very little on Tuesday and Wednesday to build up my reserves. This isn't about making your life smaller, it's about making it more strategic. We also need to look at the timing of our medication in relation to these patterns. Standard dosing, say 10 milligrams in the morning, 5 at noon, and 2.5 in the evening, is a starting point, not a law. Some people find they burn through their morning dose faster on days when they are physically active, leading to a mid-morning crash. Others find that their evening dose is too late, causing insomnia, which then ruins the next day.
When you can take a pattern to your endocrinologist, something like, I consistently feel a surge of nausea and dizziness at 11 a.m., 3 hours after my first dose, especially on work days, that is infinitely more useful than saying, I just feel bad sometimes.
It gives the doctor a lever to pull. It transforms a vague complaint into a clinical observation. But we also have to be careful. A pattern gives us information, but it doesn't always give us the full explanation. We shouldn't use our own tracking to start self-adjusting medication in ways that haven't been discussed with our medical team, nor should we use it to ignore signs of a true emergency. Tracking is a tool for communication, not a substitute for medical expertise. We must address the shadow side of variability, the moments when the symptoms mimic things so closely that we get lost in the diagnostic woods. Adrenal insufficiency is the ultimate chameleon. Because cortisol is involved in almost every bodily process, a deficiency can look like a million different things. It can look like a panic attack. It can look like a stomach bug. It can look like clinical depression or chronic fatigue syndrome. This is why the context we've talked about all series is so vital. When you're having a bad day, you have to ask, is this my AI or is this something else? Sometimes the answer is both. A minor cold that wouldn't even sideline a healthy person can trigger a significant adrenal dip because your body is trying to mount an immune response without the necessary hormonal fuel. This variability often leads to people being mislabeled as anxious or hypochondriacs because their symptoms come and go with such intensity. But the variability is actually evidence of the condition's severity, not its absence. A person with a stable illness is easy to treat. A person whose illness fluctuates based on the weather, their stress levels, and their sleep quality is a much more complex clinical puzzle. We have to resist the urge to find a simple, single cause for every dip. Sometimes a bad day is just a bad day. Sometimes it's the result of 5 tiny things: a poor night's sleep, a missed snack, a hot car, a stressful phone call, and a slightly late dose, converging at once. In those moments, the goal isn't necessarily to fix the day, but to survive it. To acknowledge that the system is currently overtaxed and to give it the rest it is demanding. Understanding that variability is an inherent feature of adrenal insufficiency, not a bug, allows you to stop fighting the reality of the fluctuations and start working with them. As we move toward the conclusion of this series, we have to talk about the actionable intelligence we can gather from this variability. One of the most important things is recognizing when a bad day is actually the start of an adrenal crisis. This is the life or death side of the variability equation. While most fluctuations are just part of the daily grind of the illness, some are warnings. This is why you must have and know your sick day rules. If the variability includes persistent vomiting, if it includes a fever that won't break, or if you feel that specific, terrifying sense of impending doom that often precedes a crisis, you don't wait to see if it's a pattern. You act. You use your emergency injection, if you have one, you follow your endocrinologist's stress dosing protocol, and you seek emergency care. The variability we've discussed is about the gray area of daily life, but it should never make you complacent about the red zone of medical emergencies. Being informed means knowing the difference between I'm having a low cortisol afternoon and my body is failing to maintain vital functions.
This is also where the community comes in. Connecting with others who understand this variability is one of the best ways to keep your perspective. When you talk to someone else who says, "Oh yeah, the 3-day crash after a wedding is totally normal for me," it takes the fear out of the experience. It validates that you aren't doing something wrong. That's why we always encourage people to join groups like the My Adrenal Life Facebook group.
Having a sanity check from people who are living the same physiological reality is invaluable. It helps you distinguish between the expected fluctuations of the disease and the signs that you need to call your doctor. It turns a lonely struggle into a shared experience of management.
Throughout these 4 parts, we have explored the labyrinth of adrenal insufficiency. We started with the basic, often ignored symptoms, the salt cravings, the hyperpigmentation, the subtle fatigue. We moved into the copycat symptoms that lead to misdiagnosis. We looked at the psychological toll. And now we've arrived at this truth. Your symptoms are real, but they are contextual. They are not a static list in a textbook. They are a living, breathing response to your life. The most important lesson is that you are the primary observer of your own body. Doctors see you for 15 minutes every few months. You see yourself every second of every day. You are the one who notices that your voice gets weak when you're tired, or that your muscles start to twitch when your dose is wearing off. These micro symptoms and their daily variations are the map of your condition. Don't throw the map away just because it's complicated. Use it, refine it. The variability of adrenal insufficiency is a challenge, but it's also an invitation to live more mindfully. You have to be more in tune with your body than the average person. You have to notice the early signs of thirst, the first hint of a headache, the subtle shift in your mood. This heightened awareness is a survival mechanism. It's what allows you to navigate a world that wasn't built for people with adrenal failure. As we wrap up this series, remember that the goal isn't to be symptom-free. That's often an impossible bar for people with AI. The goal is to be informed and empowered.
To know your body so well that the variability no longer feels like a mystery, but like a language you've learned to speak.
So, as you move forward, I want you to take this perspective with you. You are not a failure for having a bad day after a good one. You are not weak because you can't replicate Tuesday's energy on a Wednesday. You are a person managing a complex, high-stakes endocrine deficiency in a world that never stops moving. Your symptoms are information. They are your body's way of saying the demand is currently higher than the supply. When you hear that message, listen to it. Don't fight it with guilt or frustration. Respond with the care and the protocol you've developed with your healthcare team. Adrenal insufficiency is a hidden illness, and its symptoms are often invisible even to the person experiencing them until they become overwhelming. But by bringing them into the light, by naming them, tracking them, and understanding the why behind the variability, you take away their power to surprise you. This concludes our 4-part series on the hidden symptoms of adrenal insufficiency. I hope this has given you the language to describe your experience, the tools to track your patterns, and the confidence to advocate for yourself in the doctor's office. If you found this helpful, please share this series with someone else who is navigating this journey, or perhaps with a family member who is trying to understand why your good days aren't always permanent. We are all learning this together, one day and one physiological shift at a time. Head over to the My Adrenal Life Facebook group to keep the conversation going with others who truly get it.
Until next time,
Take care of yourselves, pay attention to the patterns, and remember that your experience is real, even when it changes.